very urgent. Your soulmate has a secret confession they've been afraid to make. My beloved child. Something has been sitting behind your soulmate's silence, and tonight, that silence is becoming almost impossible for them to maintain. This is not a small thought they forgot to mention. It is not a passing emotion they can simply ignore until tomorrow. It is a confession they have carried quietly, rehearsed privately, and almost revealed more than once. Only to stop at the final moment because they were afraid of what would happen after you knew. Don't skip, because the reason they kept this from you may completely change how you understand their recent behavior. There were moments when you probably wondered why their energy seemed different, why they suddenly became distant when everything appeared fine, or why they seemed ready to say something important and then changed the subject. Those moments were not meaningless. Behind them was a truth growing heavier every day. Your soulmate has been asking themselves one question repeatedly: if I finally tell them everything, will they still see me the same way? And that fear has kept their confession locked away. But something has shifted. They are beginning to realize that remaining silent could cost them more than speaking honestly ever could. Stay till the end, because what they are afraid to admit is connected directly to you, to the feelings they tried to control, and to a decision they made when they believed there was still plenty of time. There is one detail they have never explained: the moment when their feelings stopped being casual and became impossible to deny. It happened during an ordinary moment, one you may not even remember clearly. Something you said, something you did, or simply the way you carried yourself made them realize you had become more important to them than they were prepared for. And instead of telling you, they became afraid. Not because the feeling was weak, but because it was stronger than they expected. They started noticing everything: the way your presence changed their mood, the way your absence created questions, the way even small memories of you stayed with them long after the moment. Something huge is waiting for you, because their confession is not simply, I care about you. It goes much deeper. They have been hiding the fact that at some point, they privately imagined what their life might look like if you were truly beside them, and once that picture entered their mind, they could not easily erase it. But here is where everything becomes more complicated. Your soulmate did not immediately move closer when they realized how deeply they cared. They did the opposite. They tried to become logical. They told themselves they were imagining too much. They attempted to focus elsewhere, hoping the intensity would disappear if they stopped feeding it attention. Yet every attempt to distance themselves only revealed something stronger. They were not trying to escape you, they were trying to escape how vulnerable you made them feel. Don't skip, because this is where their secret confession begins to take its real shape. There is something they regret. A moment when they could have been honest with you, but fear made them choose silence. Maybe they responded differently than they truly felt. Maybe they allowed you to believe they were unaffected. Maybe they stepped away when every instinct inside them wanted to remain close. Since then, they have replayed that moment privately and wondered whether they accidentally convinced you that you did not matter. The truth is almost the reverse. You mattered enough to frighten them. You mattered enough that the possibility of rejection felt heavier than they wanted to admit. And now another realization has entered their mind: what if their silence pushed you toward a future that no longer includes them? That question has changed everything. Stay till the end, because they are reaching the point where protecting their pride no longer feels worth losing the connection. They have imagined the conversation. They have imagined looking directly at you and admitting that their distance was never the full truth. They want to tell you that certain memories between you meant far more to them than they ever showed. They want to admit that when other people mentioned you, they listened more carefully than anyone realized. They want to explain why your name could suddenly change their expression, why they remember details you assumed they had forgotten, and why they sometimes disappeared into silence after meaningful moments with you. But there is still one confession underneath all of those confessions, and this is the one they have been most afraid to make. They are afraid that you became emotionally important to them before they were ready. They did not plan it. They did not control it. And once they recognized it, they began wondering whether you might somehow feel the same. That possibility gave them hope, but it also created the fear that one wrong move could destroy everything. Now the silence is reaching its breaking point. Something happened inside your soulmate recently, not some dramatic outside event, but a quiet realization they could no longer argue with. They imagined you moving forward without ever knowing what was truly inside their heart. They imagined someone else giving you the honesty, consistency, and courage they had been too hesitant to offer. And suddenly, keeping the secret no longer felt safe. It felt like the greatest risk of all. Something huge is waiting for you, because the confession they have been afraid to make contains one final truth: they never wanted you to think their hesitation meant you were unimportant. Their hesitation came from the opposite place. They saw something in you that made the connection feel real enough to matter, and real things carry consequences. They knew that once they admitted how deeply you affected them, they could no longer pretend everything was casual. They would have to become honest about what they wanted, honest about what they feared, and honest about the future they had quietly pictured. Don't skip now, because there is still one missing piece. Your soulmate has been holding on to words they once believed they would never say aloud. They want to tell you that if they could return to one specific moment between you, they would respond differently. They would not hide behind uncertainty. They would not pretend they felt less than they did. They would make sure you understood that your presence had already changed something inside them. Stay till the end, because they are closer than ever to revealing what that moment was. And why it became the memory they could never completely leave behind. They know they cannot control your response. They know honesty may change the connection forever. But they are beginning to understand that some truths become heavier when hidden, and this one has become too important to carry alone. The next time their silence feels unusual, remember this: there may be words standing directly behind it, waiting for enough courage to finally come forward. And when those words arrive, the biggest surprise may not be that they cared. It may be discovering how long they cared, how much they remembered, and how many times they almost told you. Because there is one sentence they have repeatedly stopped themselves from saying, and once you hear what comes after it, everything you thought you understood about their distance may suddenly look completely different. There is a sentence your soulmate has carried to the edge of confession again and again, but every time they came close to saying it, something inside them pulled them back. I wish you knew what you truly mean to me. Those words sound simple, but behind them is a truth they have been protecting for much longer than you realize. Don't skip, because the next detail changes the meaning of everything that came before. Your soulmate has not only been thinking about what they should tell you. They have been remembering the exact moments when they should have told you sooner. One memory keeps returning with unusual clarity. It was a moment when you were simply being yourself, perhaps speaking honestly, smiling without trying to impress anyone, or showing a side of yourself that others might overlook. Something shifted inside them. They suddenly realized they were no longer observing you like an ordinary person in their life. They were emotionally invested. Your happiness mattered. Your opinion mattered. Even the possibility of disappointing you mattered. And that realization frightened them because it meant they had something meaningful to lose. Stay till the end, because this is where the confession becomes even more surprising. After that moment, your soulmate began comparing every interaction with the feeling they experienced around you. They noticed how conversations with other people could feel normal, while one conversation with you remained in their thoughts for hours. They noticed how a small message from you could change the direction of their entire day. They noticed that when something good happened, a quiet thought appeared, "I wish I could tell them." And when something difficult happened, another thought followed, "I wonder what they would say." They tried to dismiss those thoughts, but they kept returning. Something huge is waiting for you, because eventually they understood what they had been avoiding. You had become connected to the future they were imagining. Not because anyone pressured them. Not because they were chasing some perfect fantasy. It happened naturally, quietly, almost invisibly. And then came the mistake they still regret. Instead of showing you more, they showed you less. Instead of becoming clearer, they became harder to understand. They thought hiding their emotions would protect the connection until they figured everything out. But now they realize their silence may have created exactly the misunderstanding they feared most. You may have looked at their hesitation and thought, maybe they simply don't care. And if you ever thought that, there is something they desperately wish they could correct. What they want to tell you now is that some of their strangest behavior came from an internal battle you never saw. One side wanted to move toward you without hesitation. The other kept asking questions. What if the timing is wrong? What if I say too much? What if they have already moved on emotionally? What if I waited too long? Don't skip, because one of those questions has recently become louder than all the others. What if I lose them because I never had the courage to tell the truth? That question has shaken them more than they expected. They have started seeing their silence differently. What once felt like protection now feels like a wall, and they know they helped build it. There were times when they wanted to reach out and explain everything, but they convinced themselves to wait for a better moment. Then another day passed. Another opportunity disappeared. Another unfinished conversation became another memory. Yet their feelings did not disappear with those opportunities. They became clearer. Stay till the end, because your soulmate has finally admitted something privately that they resisted for a long time. If they could choose between protecting their pride and giving this connection a genuine chance, they no longer want pride to win. That is a major change. Before, they wanted certainty before becoming vulnerable. Now they understand that meaningful connections rarely arrive with guarantees. Sometimes honesty has to come before certainty. And there is another layer to their confession. They have wondered whether you noticed the little signs they accidentally revealed, the extra attention, the questions they asked about things that mattered to you, the way they remembered something you mentioned only once, or the sudden quietness whenever a conversation became emotionally meaningful. Those were cracks in the wall they were trying to maintain. Their real feelings kept appearing despite their efforts to hide them. Something huge is waiting for you, because beneath all of this is an admission they have barely been able to make even to themselves. They wanted to know whether you could imagine them in your future too. That question became important because they had already begun imagining you in theirs. Not some flawless story where nothing ever goes wrong, but ordinary moments. Conversations after long days, shared laughter over small things, being understood without having to explain every emotion, and knowing that someone meaningful was genuinely there. That was the secret picture they were afraid to show you. And now something inside them has changed enough that the confession is moving closer to the surface. They are beginning to understand that waiting forever will never create the perfect moment. There will always be uncertainty. There will always be reasons to hesitate. But there may not always be another opportunity. Don't skip, because this is the realization that has made their secret almost impossible to contain. Your soulmate has started asking themselves what would hurt more, telling you the truth and discovering that your feelings are different, or never telling you and spending years wondering what could have happened. The second possibility has become harder for them to accept. They would rather be remembered for finally becoming honest than remain trapped behind a version of themselves that never showed you what was real. Stay till the end, because there is still something they have not fully revealed, the reason they believe you may already understand more than they think. There was a moment between you when they felt as though you saw straight through their defenses. Maybe it was the way you looked at them after they changed the subject. Maybe you became quieter when they pulled away. Maybe you stopped asking questions because you sensed they were not ready to answer. Whatever happened, your soulmate remembers it. And they have wondered ever since whether you recognized what they were trying so desperately to hide. Something huge is waiting for you, because if they finally speak, they do not want to give you half the truth anymore. They want to explain why they pulled back, why certain moments affected them so deeply, why they remembered you when they were alone, and why they allowed fear to speak louder than their feelings. Most importantly, they want you to know that their confession is not about creating pressure. It is about finally giving you the honesty you should have received from the beginning. And there is one last secret underneath everything they are preparing to say. Your soulmate made a quiet promise to themselves recently. If another genuine opportunity appears, another conversation where the distance disappears and the truth feels close, they do not want to run from it again. This time, they want to stay in the moment. This time, they want to say what they once swallowed. Because the sentence they have been afraid to finish is becoming clearer. I kept pretending I could walk away from what I felt for you, but every time I tried. And what comes after those words is the confession they have protected more carefully than anything else. Something your soulmate finally understood has made it almost impossible for them to keep hiding behind silence. Every time they tried to convince themselves they could simply walk away from what they felt for you, something brought their heart back to the same unfinished truth. Not because they were chasing an illusion, but because there were real moments between you that stayed with them long after they should have faded. Don't skip, because this is where the confession they have been afraid to finish becomes much clearer. The sentence inside them continues like this: I kept pretending I could walk away from what I felt for you, but every time I tried, I realized I was leaving behind something I never truly wanted to lose. That is what they struggled to admit. They thought distance would simplify everything. They believed that if they became quieter, busier, or more controlled, eventually their emotions would settle. But instead, distance showed them what your presence had actually meant. They began remembering details they never expected to remember, the tone of certain conversations, the moments you made them feel understood, the little things about you that nobody else seemed to notice. Stay till the end, because there is one memory in particular they have never been able to dismiss. It was not necessarily the biggest moment between you. It may have looked completely ordinary from the outside. But something about that moment made your soulmate feel safe enough to imagine being completely honest with you. For a few seconds, they almost said everything. They almost admitted that you had become the person they wanted to know more deeply, the person whose absence they noticed, the person they secretly hoped would remain in their life. Then fear interrupted them. They changed their words. They protected themselves. And the moment passed. Something huge is waiting for you, because your soulmate now believes that moment was a turning point. They have wondered what might have happened if they had simply spoken honestly. Would you have smiled? Would you have been surprised? Would you have admitted something too? Those unanswered questions have followed them, and now they are tired of building their future around questions they were too afraid to answer. Their secret confession is becoming less about the past and more about what they want to do differently from this moment forward. They do not want you guessing anymore. They do not want silence speaking on their behalf. And most of all, they do not want fear deciding whether something meaningful ever receives a genuine chance. But there is another truth hidden beneath all of this, and it may be the most unexpected one yet. Your soulmate has realized that they were not only afraid of rejection. They were afraid you might actually feel the same way. Don't skip, because that sounds strange until you understand what it would mean for them. If you felt nothing, they could eventually accept it and move forward. But if you felt something too, then suddenly this connection would become real in a way they could no longer dismiss. They would have to stop hiding behind excuses. They would have to communicate clearly, show consistency, and allow themselves to be genuinely known. That level of emotional honesty felt enormous to someone who had spent so much time keeping their deepest feelings private. Stay till the end, because recently they noticed something that challenged every excuse they had been using. They remembered the way you responded during one meaningful interaction, and for the first time they allowed themselves to consider that maybe you had been waiting for honesty too. Maybe your silence was not indifference. Maybe you had questions of your own. Maybe both of you had been standing on opposite sides of the same unfinished conversation, each waiting for the other person to become brave first. That possibility has stayed in their mind. Something huge is waiting for you, because it created a decision. If they ever receive another clear opportunity to speak honestly, they do not want to waste it. They want to tell you that their confusing behavior was never meant to make you doubt your worth. They want to acknowledge the times they could have communicated better. They want to tell you that you were not imagining every meaningful moment simply because they later became quiet. Most importantly, they want to stop giving you fragments when you deserve clarity. Their confession is not going to be some perfect speech. They